He wore a hoodie every single day, even in the heat of a Texas summer. Not because of fashion, but to hide the thing that destroyed his life. At just 30 years old, Delano was turned away from job after job, judged by strangers, and even slept at a bus stop, all because of a mysterious, growing lump on his back that no doctor could explain. But when he finally found someone willing to help, what she discovered shocked even the experts. How would you live if the world feared something on your body more than your character? This isn't just a medical mystery. It's a story about shame, survival, and a second chance. Hit that subscribe button if you believe real stories like this deserve to be told and shared. It was a Tuesday morning, and the gym smelled like linoleum and stale sweat, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes even after you've left. I was 19 then, full of adrenaline and pride, fresh out of high school, trying to outlift the guy next to me. My shoulder had been sore for days, but I figured it was just the strain of trying to prove something. That day, as I pulled down the weight bar for another set, something in my shoulder snapped. Not a loud crack, but a quiet, inward pop that only I seemed to notice. I brushed it off, finished the rep, even smiled at the mirror. But later that night, standing shirtless in front of the bathroom mirror, I noticed it. A small knot, a tight, raised bulge, like a marble just beneath my skin. I thought it'd go away. People always think it'll go away. Weeks passed, then months. The knot didn't leave. It grew. Slow but steady. I started sleeping more on my right side to avoid pressing down on it. At work, I wore slightly looser shirts. It didn't hurt, at least not at first, but it was there, persistent, like an echo that wouldn't fade. By the time I was 21, it had the size of a golf ball, maybe bigger. I stopped going shirtless around friends. I stopped going swimming. I stopped dating. The first time someone commented on it, I was in line at the corner store. A man behind me, total stranger, tapped my shoulder and said, "Hey man, what's going on with your back?" I laughed it off, told him it was an old injury from football. He didn't believe me, I could see it in his eyes. That's when the shift happened, not in my body, but in the way people looked at me. The stares weren't cruel. Worse, they were curious, like I was something odd, off, something to whisper about once I walked past. I started wearing that shirt, you know the one. A gray hoodie with a thick left shoulder stitched heavier on one side from where I wore it even in summer. It became part of me, my shell, my disguise, my only defense against the questions I couldn't answer. It was around that time I saw my reflection differently, not just physically. It wasn't the lump that hurt me. It was what it stole, my confidence, my voice, my place in the world. That thing on my back, it wasn't just a mass. It was a wall between me and life. I finally saw a doctor when I was 23. I remember walking into the clinic, thinking, this is it. They'll take it out, and I'll be free. He examined it, nodded, told me he could drain it. Drain it? I didn't know what that meant. He stuck a needle in and pulled out some yellowish fluid. I watched it fill a tube like lemonade concentrate. It felt strange. Some pressure eased, sure, but the lump didn't go away, just flattened a little. He told me it was a lipoma, said it wasn't dangerous, said it might come back, and it did. 6 weeks later, it rose again, like a weed in the same spot. But something in me had changed, not the body, my spirit. I stopped believing people wanted to help. I stopped believing this thing could be fixed. It just became part of my story, not a chapter, more like a stain that soaked through every page. I kept working odd jobs. Some days, I did warehouse shifts. Other days, I sold used electronics on Craigslist. I stayed afloat, barely. But there was a loneliness that grew in tandem with the lump, an invisible companion, one I couldn't shake. One night, while folding shirts at a laundromat gig, a kid asked me if I had a baby turtle under my skin. I laughed, pretending it didn't sting, but when I went home and looked in the mirror, I didn't laugh. I stared, long and hard. I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. One of the worst things about carrying something visible on your body is that people assume it tells them everything about you. They see it and think they know your story. They think they know your pain, but they don't. They don't know how I started sleeping in a hoodie, even in Texas heat, because the thought of someone seeing me in my sleep made me panic. They don't know how I avoided hugs. I used to love hugs, but now I pulled away, flinched even, if someone reached for me from behind. They don't know about the jobs I lost. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because dress code policy didn't allow modifications, or because public-facing roles required a clean, symmetrical appearance. I heard every variation of rejection, and each one cut deeper than the last. One manager at a retail store pulled me aside after a promising interview. I had been so sure I got the job. He looked at my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, it just might make customers uncomfortable." I smiled, shook his hand, said I understood. But inside I was crumbling. I didn't even make it to the bus stop that day. I sat on the curb for an hour, staring at the pavement, wondering how a human being becomes invisible without disappearing. It's strange, the things you begin to believe when no one looks at you with dignity. After a while I stopped believing I deserved it. Some nights, I would press my fingers into the lump, wondering what it really was. Was it growing? Was it something else entirely? Something bad? I didn't have insurance. I didn't have money. What I had was shame and silence, and both were loud. By 27, I had stopped trying to fix it. I didn't even Google it anymore. I just accepted it, like a roommate I hated but couldn't evict. Then came the harder part, when the pain started. Not just emotional pain, actual, radiating pain down my left arm. The lump had grown big enough to push on nerves. I would wake up in the middle of the night with a tingling sensation, like pins and needles flooding my fingertips. Sometimes, the pain reached my chest, and for a terrifying second, I thought I was having a heart attack. That's when I stopped sleeping through the night. I began walking, late, long, aimless. I walked the streets of Houston like a ghost, hoodie zipped, hands in pockets. No direction, no destination. During one of those walks, I passed a storefront window and caught my reflection in the glass. I didn't recognize myself again, but this time, not because of sadness. I realized I looked like someone people would be afraid of. The hood, the slouch, the guarded eyes. That moment haunted me. Was I becoming something I feared? A shadow, a warning, a man in the background? I tried again, just once. I scraped together what I had, some savings, a little help from a friend, and saw another doctor, a small clinic. This time the guy looked unsure. He prodded the lump, asked if anyone had ever done a biopsy. When I said no, he frowned but didn't say much. He drained it again, same yellowish fluid, same false sense of relief. But that's all he did. No further tests, no referrals. And like before, 6 weeks later, it was back. Bigger. That's when the hope really died. When it came back faster and stronger, like it was laughing at me. I went quiet after that, quieter than I'd ever been. I stopped calling friends. I missed birthdays. I ignored texts. I didn't have the energy to explain anymore. People thought I was depressed. They were right. I wasn't just sad, I was hollow. Like my spirit had packed up and left, leaving only the version of me that could go through the motions. Until one night, one small, strange night, that would change everything. But I didn't know it yet. Not then. All I knew was that I was cold, and tired, and hungry, and that I had nowhere left to go. You don't notice the cold right away. Not the kind that creeps in, not the kind that takes its time. It starts at the edges, your fingertips, your toes, and then slowly it spreads. That's the kind of cold I felt the night I first fell asleep on a bench. The wooden slats pressed hard against my spine, right where the lump had grown large and angry. I wrapped my arms around myself, tucked my chin into the hoodie, and tried to convince my body it was still safe, that maybe this was just temporary. A few bad nights, a slump, nothing permanent. But the truth doesn't care about hope. It just keeps happening. The first night I was homeless, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought the weight of it all, my body breaking down, jobs slipping through my hands, the fear of the lump growing into something worse, would crash over me like a wave. But there were no waves, just numbness. People passed by and didn't see me. Or worse, they saw me and looked away. That's the part I wasn't ready for. The cold stung my skin, sure, but what hurt more was how quickly I became invisible. I sat in the shadows of the bus stop, hood pulled low, eyes on the sidewalk. I watched shoes walk by, heels, sneakers, boots, and tried to guess what kind of lives those feet belonged to, who they loved, where they were going, if they were warm. My stomach growled, loudly, embarrassingly. I hadn't eaten since the morning, just a granola bar and half a bottle of water. I pressed my hand into my side as if I could silence the hunger, as if shame could fill an empty belly. The lump was throbbing that night, like it knew I was alone now, like it was claiming territory over what was left of me. My shoulder burned from the weight of it. The pressure crawled into my neck and down my spine. A woman walked past and clutched her purse tighter. She didn't look at me, just crossed the street as if her instincts told her I was dangerous. I wasn't angry at her. I might have done the same thing. By the third night, I learned the rhythms of the street. which benches weren't patrolled, which alleyways were quieter, which vending machines might still give you a soda if you jiggled them just right. But the hardest lesson? Learning how to disappear. I kept my head down, didn't ask for help, didn't talk to the others on the street. They had their own demons, their own versions of the lump. I remember one night a kid, couldn't have been older than 6, pointed at me and whispered to his mom, "Is he a monster?" The mother pulled him along quickly, embarrassed, but I caught her glance, not pity, not concern, fear, and just like that, I became something else in her eyes. Not a man, not a patient, not even a person, just something to be avoided. That night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the stars, my back flat on the park bench, trying to remember the last time someone had touched my shoulder without recoiling. I couldn't. The pain in my shoulder had changed too. It wasn't just physical anymore. It felt like it had a voice, like it whispered, "You don't belong anywhere." It told me I was broken, useless, forgotten, and I was starting to believe it until the rain came, cold, relentless. Houston rain doesn't sprinkle, it soaks. Within seconds, my clothes were drenched. The hoodie stuck to my skin like a wet bandage. My teeth chattered. I pulled my knees to my chest, tried to shield the lump, which now felt twice as heavy with water. I pressed my forehead to the edge of the bench, shivering. That's when I whispered something I hadn't said in years. "God, if you're real, this would be a really good time." I wasn't expecting an answer, and I didn't get one. Not that night. But something was shifting. I didn't know it then, but help was coming. And it wouldn't look like a miracle. It would look like a girl with mismatched rain boots and a pink umbrella. But first, I had to survive the rain. I must have dozed off despite the rain, or maybe I blacked out from the cold. Either way, when I opened my eyes, the world was blurry. Not from sleep, but from water, both falling from the sky and clinging to my eyelashes. My hoodie was soaked through, heavy like it had absorbed all my failures. I heard giggling. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't directed at me. Just innocent laughter, small and bubbling, the kind that floats through a quiet morning like birdsong. I turned my head, barely. My body ached too much to move fast. She couldn't have been more than 12. A little girl in rain boots that didn't match, one pink, one yellow, and a too large backpack bouncing on her back. She held a bright pink umbrella above her head, shaped like a ladybug. Her cheeks were round, her braids swinging as she walked. She froze when she saw me. I could tell by the way her feet stopped, but her mouth didn't. The giggle died instantly. We locked eyes. I looked away first. That was the rule. Always look away first. But then I heard the scuff of her boots on the wet pavement. She was walking toward me. "No, please don't." I sat up, wincing at the bolt of pain that shot through my shoulder. I tried to look less pathetic, like I was just resting, just taking shelter, like I wasn't everything she'd been warned about. She stepped closer, still holding the umbrella high, until it hovered over both of us. "You look cold," she said. Her voice was gentle but confident, not scared, not judgmental, just observant. "I'm fine," I croaked. My throat felt like sandpaper. She tilted her head. "You don't look fine." Then I saw her eyes shift toward my shoulder. Not a stare, not a flinch, just curiosity. The kind children still have before the world teaches them to fear what's different. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. I froze. She added quickly, "I mean, if it's okay to ask." No one had asked me like that in years. Not directly, not respectfully, not like I was still a person. Before I could answer, a voice called out, "Ariana!" An older woman approached, brisk but careful on the wet sidewalk. She wore a plastic poncho and carried a grocery bag. Her gray hair was pulled back into a scarf. Her expression was a mix of sternness and concern. "I told you not to run off like that." "But he's cold," Ariana said, pointing to me like I was a stray dog that needed rescuing. The woman's eyes landed on me. Not unkind, not trusting either, just assessing. I tried to stand, but my legs betrayed me. The moment I shifted weight onto my feet, they buckled. My knees hit the concrete hard, and for a moment, the sky spun. The woman moved fast. She was beside me before I could apologize. One hand on my elbow, the other bracing my back. "Don't move too quick," she said, voice calm but firm. "You ain't eaten, have you?" I blinked at her. She didn't wait for an answer. "Come on, let's get you out of this rain." I wanted to say no. I really did. Pride reared its ugly head. I didn't want to be someone's burden, someone's project. But I couldn't feel my fingers, and my knees still shook, and this woman had the kind of voice that didn't accept excuses. They led me, half walking, half carrying, down the street, around the corner, and into a small brick house with a sagging porch and wind chimes that sang softly in the breeze. The warmth hit me like a wave. I hadn't realized how cold I was until it was gone. Inside, everything smelled like cinnamon and something fried. A couch with hand-knitted covers, a space heater humming low, old gospel music playing faintly from a kitchen radio. "Sit," the woman said, gesturing to the couch, "and take off that hoodie. You're soaked clean through." I hesitated. She noticed. "It's all right, baby," she said gently. "Ain't nobody here to judge you." So I peeled it off, slowly, revealing the bulge on my left shoulder, swollen, angry, red around the edges. She didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She just nodded. "Been carrying that long?" "Over 10 years, I said, my voice hoarse. She tisked softly, then turned to Ariana. "Go get the first aid kit, and that blue blanket from my bed." Ariana dashed off without a word. The woman turned back to me, held out her hand. "Name's Miss Armstrong. You can stay here tonight. You look like you need rest more than anything." My throat tightened. I hadn't been offered shelter in months. I hadn't heard my own name in days. "Delano," I whispered. "Delano Crowfield." "Well, Delano," she said with a small smile, "you're safe now." I didn't sleep much that first night, but not because I was uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. The blanket Miss Armstrong gave me was warm, heavier than I expected, smelling faintly of lavender and cedarwood. I lay there on the couch, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow and lazy above me. The quiet hum of the heater filled the silence, steady and safe, the kind of silence that didn't scream loneliness, but comfort. It had been so long since I felt safe, I didn't know how to let myself relax. My body, conditioned by months of cold concrete and shifting shadows, didn't know how to rest in softness. I lay stiff, like a man afraid the dream would end if he moved too much. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Ariana was already dressed for school, her backpack on, hair tied neatly with purple ribbons. She grinned when she saw me sit up, eyes still puffy with sleep. "You snore," she announced matter-of-factly, handing me a plate with 2 golden pancakes stacked high. Miss Armstrong chuckled from the stove. "Leave the man alone, baby." I smiled, a real one this time. The kind that doesn't come from politeness, but surprise. I hadn't had breakfast made for me in years. I didn't remember the last time someone welcomed me into their morning. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Eat," Miss Armstrong said, pouring syrup on my plate without asking. Skinny as a fence post. I ate slowly, savoring each bite like it might be the last. Not just the food, but the feeling. Warmth. Family. Laughter in the background. A chair scraping across linoleum. The soft click of the front door as Ariana waved goodbye and headed out with her umbrella. I stayed with them longer than I intended. At first, I told myself it would just be a day, then maybe a weekend. But each morning came with the smell of something warm on the stove, and each evening came with a sense of peace I hadn't known I needed. Miss Armstrong didn't pry. She didn't sit me down and ask for my story. She just let me be, and maybe that was the kindest thing anyone could have done. Instead of questions, she gave me small tasks. Fixing a loose hinge on the bathroom door, patching up the back fence that leaned too far to the right, moving boxes from the attic. They weren't demands, they were invitations, ways to feel useful again. I noticed the change in me slowly, the way my shoulders began to lower from my ears, the way I stopped checking over my shoulder every 5 minutes, the way I laughed, actually laughed, when Ariana tricked me into eating a cookie that turned out to be full of cayenne pepper. She claimed it was science. Some days I caught myself humming, just a tune, nothing special, but it was enough to make me stop and think, I'm still in here, somewhere. But the lump didn't let me forget. It was still there, still heavy, still growing. One night, as I was drying the dishes, Miss Armstrong asked, softly, like she was offering me a lifeline, "Have you ever tried getting a second opinion on that thing?" I paused, the dish towel frozen in my hands. "I did, a few times," I replied. "But no one ever really knew what it was, just drained it and sent me off." She clicked her tongue. "That ain't right." I shrugged. I kinda gave up on doctors. Gave up on a lot, to be honest. She looked at me for a long moment, not with pity, with something steadier, like belief. "Well," she said, setting her teacup down, "maybe it's time someone didn't give up on you." I didn't know how to respond to that. Later that evening, Ariana pulled out her tablet and flopped onto the couch beside me. "You ever watch pimple-popping videos?" I blinked. "Pimple, what?" She giggled and tapped the screen. Up came a YouTube channel, Dr. Pimple Popper. the screen filled with close-up shots of all kinds of lumps and bumps and cysts being carefully removed by a woman with calm hands and a warm smile. I grimaced, then leaned closer. Something about the way she worked, the precision, the patience, the calm in her voice, was mesmerizing. It wasn't gross, it was hopeful. People came in with things that looked just like mine, some worse, and she helped them. She actually helped them. "You should send her a message," Ariana said, chin in her hands. "She's probably famous," I muttered. "So? You never know." Her words echoed in my head long after the video ended. You never know. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, staring up at the ceiling again. But this time it wasn't fear or pain that kept me awake. It was a flicker, a strange, unfamiliar flicker that had been gone so long I barely recognized it. Hope. The videos kept replaying in my head. Dr. Lee's calm voice, her kindness with patience, the way she didn't flinch or look away, no matter how large or strange the lump. She treated every case like it mattered, like the person mattered. It felt so far away. California, cameras, confidence, all things I didn't have. But Ariana's voice nudged me again from memory. You never know. The next morning I asked Miss Armstrong if I could borrow her laptop. She didn't ask why, just nodded and handed it to me after breakfast. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft morning sun streaming through the window, casting a warm glow across the plastic tablecloth. My hands hovered above the keyboard. I hadn't written anything to anyone in so long. It felt foreign. Where do you even begin when your story has too many broken parts? I started slow. I typed and deleted the first sentence 6 times. Then finally I just told the truth. Dear Dr. Lee, my name is Delano Crowfield. I'm 30 years old and I live in Houston, Texas. I've had a lump on my left shoulder since I was 19. Doctors told me it was a lipoma. One tried to drain it. It came back. It's grown larger over the years. It hurts now, not just physically. I'm writing because I saw your videos. And for the first time in a long time I thought, maybe someone would listen, really listen. Maybe someone would know what this is. I don't have insurance. I don't have a lot of money. But I've got this thing on my back and a little bit of hope left. If there's any way I could be seen by you, even just for an opinion, I'd be grateful. Thank you for doing what you do, for treating people like people. Sincerely, Delano Crowfield. I read it 3 times. My hand trembled when I clicked send. Then I closed the laptop and told myself not to expect anything, because expecting things had always hurt more than silence. But 2 days later, I got a response. It was short, simple, but enough to stop my breath mid-sentence. Hi Delano, thank you for your message. I'd like to hear more about your case. Would you be open to traveling to our clinic in Los Angeles for an initial consultation? Dr. Sandra Lee's team. I stared at the screen so long, Miss Armstrong thought something was wrong. When I told her, she grinned. Not a big grin, a knowing one. Like she'd already seen this coming. I'll call my niece, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. She owes me a favor or two. Maybe she can help with a bus ticket. I couldn't believe it. Everything I'd avoided, ignored, and buried for years, it was now staring back at me. A chance, a real one. But with that chance came fear. What if they couldn't help? What if it was worse than I thought? What if the thing inside me had already done too much damage? I voiced all of this to Miss Armstrong that evening as we sipped tea on the porch. She listened, like she always did. Then she said, "Let me tell you something my mother used to say. Sometimes God don't send miracles dressed in light. Sometimes he wraps them in doubt, so you got to walk by faith, not by sight." I looked at her. "That woman ain't just a doctor," she said. "She's your second chance." I left for Los Angeles 5 days later. Ariana made me a card. It was a folded sheet of notebook paper covered in stickers and glitter glue. Inside, she had drawn a cartoon version of me, big shoulders, big hoodie, and next to me was a cartoon version of her, holding up the umbrella. Above us she'd written, "You got this." I tucked it into my backpack. I didn't know what was waiting for me out there. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking towards something. The Greyhound bus rolled into Los Angeles at dawn. The city felt different. The air was drier, the sky wider. Even the noise seemed sharper, like every car horn and crosswalk beep was dialed up just a little too loud. It had been a 28-hour ride from Houston, most of it in silence. My knees pressed against the seat in front of me, the weight of my shoulder making every shift feel like dragging bricks across bone. But I'd made it. Miss Armstrong had packed me sandwiches, 2 apples, and a Ziploc bag with lemon drops. Ariana slipped in a second note inside my backpack. If you get scared, just remember the umbrella. You're not alone. I was scared, more than I let on. I arrived early to the clinic, too early. Sat across the street at a bus bench for almost an hour, watching the glass doors, watching other people walk in. Some limped. Some were carried. One woman held her face like it might fall apart. We all came to this place for one reason: hope wrapped in scalpel blades and calm voices. At 9:15, I walked through the door. The waiting room was clean and quiet. Soft instrumental music played overhead, the kind that's supposed to lower your heart rate, but mine was already beating out of my chest. They called my name. Delano Crowfield? I stood. The nurse smiled warmly, led me down a hallway painted in soft earth tones, and into a small exam room. I sat on the edge of the padded table, my hands clenched together in my lap. When Dr. Lee walked in, she was exactly like she was on the videos: composed, kind-eyed, present. She didn't rush. She didn't look through me. "Hi, I'm Dr. Lee," she said, extending a hand. "It's nice to meet you, Delano." I shook her hand, trying not to let her see how much mine trembled. She asked me about the lump, how long it had been there, when it started hurting, what doctors had told me. Then she asked if she could take a look. I nodded and slowly pulled off the hoodie, revealing the lump, now redder, slightly misshapen, pressing outward like it wanted to escape me. Her brows furrowed slightly, and she traced the scar on my back. "This was where they drained it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She tilted her head, puzzled. "They said it was a lipoma?" "Yeah. Lipomas don't drain," she said softly. "They're solid. There must have been fluid in there." I swallowed. He pulled out fluid, yellow, thick. She didn't say anything for a moment, just looked again, then gently pressed around the area. It hurt, but I didn't flinch. "Okay," she said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." She numbed the area and inserted a needle. Within seconds, yellowish fluid filled the syringe. "You were right," she said. "There's fluid, and quite a bit of it." Then came the part I wasn't ready for. She stepped back, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Delano, this is not a lipoma. I don't know exactly what this is yet, but this isn't what they told you it was. We're going to need imaging, blood work, and we're going to send this fluid to the lab." The room spun a little, not because of her tone, it wasn't unkind, but because of what it meant. I'd lived over a decade thinking it was one thing, that it was just a bad break, a misfortune, something too small to matter but big enough to ruin things. But now, there was no name, no category, just mystery. And mystery is a terrifying place to live. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt tight. Not from panic, something deeper. A grief I hadn't prepared for, the kind that builds slowly over years and suddenly cracks open like a dam. I muttered. "I thought I'd come here and you'd just take it out. Fix it. You know?" Dr. Lee sat on the small stool across from me, her tone gentle. "I understand, and I wish it were that simple. But if we don't know what it is, we can't fix it the right way. I'm going to do everything I can, Delano. But this might take time. Time. I didn't know if I had any more of that in me." She drained almost a liter of fluid that day. I watched the syringes fill one after the other. The pressure eased and my shoulder felt lighter, but my spirit didn't. On the way back to the small room I was staying in, I passed a storefront window, and once again, I didn't recognize the man in the reflection. He wasn't hunched in pain, he wasn't covered in dirt, but he looked just as lost. That night, the room felt smaller than before. The four walls seemed to inch closer, like they were trying to press the weight of uncertainty into my chest. The ceiling fan above spun like it did back at Miss Armstrong's, but here it didn't soothe me. It just reminded me of everything I had left behind. I had come all this way, over 1,000 miles, hoping to be told that I was fixable, that this thing could be named, removed, erased. But what I got instead was a maybe, a wait, a pause in a life that already felt like it had been frozen for too long. I lay on the thin mattress, one arm draped over my eyes, trying not to think, but thoughts are relentless when the body is quiet. What if I wasn't fixable? What if this was something worse, something I had let grow too long? I thought about Ariana, about her little umbrella, her fearless way of pointing at the lump and asking what it was. I thought about Miss Armstrong, how she didn't flinch when I took off my hoodie, how she made room for me without needing a story first. I thought about Houston, about the bench, about the silence. The truth was, I wasn't just afraid of what the doctors would find, I was afraid they would find nothing, that it would stay a mystery forever, that I would always be that guy with the thing no one could fix, the man with no name for his pain. That's a special kind of loneliness. To not even have language for what hurts you. I sat up in bed, the side of my shoulder still sore from where Dr. Lee had drawn the fluid. I could feel it already starting to refill. Not as much, but it was there, creeping back in. I pressed my palm to it, hard, as if I could stop it from forming again. "You're not supposed to be here," I whispered. Not to the lump, to myself, to this whole moment. I felt my jaw tighten, a strange heat behind my eyes. It wasn't anger, not exactly, it was grief, slow and deep and bitter. For years I had carried this thing thinking I was the only one who didn't have answers. But now that someone else said, "I don't know," it made it feel so much heavier. I pulled my hoodie back on and walked out of the room. I didn't have a destination, I just needed air, noise, something that wasn't silence. The Los Angeles night was cooler than Houston's, but it had the same kind of loneliness, the same emptiness between streetlights. I walked aimlessly down the block, passing shuttered shops and parked cars, feeling like a ghost in a city that didn't even know my name. I sat on a curb near a bus stop, pulled my knees up, rested my arms on top. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, I just didn't have anything left in me to release. That's what rock bottom feels like sometimes, not like a crash, but like nothing, like numb, like pause. And in that pause I heard Ariana's voice again, soft in the back of my mind. "You got this." 2 days later, Dr. Lee called. Her voice was calm but direct. She wanted me to come back for a CT scan. "We need to understand what we're looking at," she said, "from the inside." I hesitated, not because I didn't want answers, but because part of me was still bracing for disappointment. You learn not to get your hopes up when you've spent over a decade watching them fall apart. But she didn't sound like someone guessing, she sounded like someone looking. And that made all the difference. When I arrived back at the clinic, the staff greeted me by name. It was a small thing, but it cracked something in me. For years I'd been sir or hey you or worse, nothing at all. But here, I had a name. Dr. Lee met me in the hallway. She was holding a clipboard, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We're going to start with a CT," she explained, walking beside me. "It's going to take images in thin slices. Imagine a loaf of bread, cut piece by piece. That's how we can see where the fluid is, where it's coming from, and where it's going." I nodded, grateful for how she explained things, like I deserved to understand my own body. The scan room was cold, metallic, the kind of place that smells sterile and sounds like silence with a heartbeat. I lay on the table, arms at my side, and the machine whirred to life. As it slid me inside, I closed my eyes and tried to keep my breathing steady. Inside that tube, time moved strange. Seconds felt like minutes. I thought about all the years I hadn't looked inward, literally or metaphorically, about how long I'd been afraid of knowing, of naming. But now there was no going back. After the scan, I waited in a smaller room, sipping water from a paper cup. My shoulder throbbed faintly, less than before but still there, like a reminder, like a question mark lodged under the skin. Dr. Lee walked in 20 minutes later, holding a set of printed images. She sat beside me, not across, like we were studying it together, like this was a partnership. "Okay," she said, tapping one of the scans with her pen. "This is the fluid pocket." I leaned in. She traced a line with her finger. "And this is where it's coming from." She explained the lymphatic system, how it moves fluid throughout the body, how it's supposed to drain and recirculate. Then she paused, pointed to a specific area in my neck. "Right here," she said, "you've got a blockage. Think of it like a kink in a garden hose. Everything behind it gets backed up. The fluid has nowhere else to go, so it finds the nearest open space. In your case, under the skin of your upper back." A slow realization crawled over me. "So, that's why it keeps coming back?" I asked. She nodded. "Exactly. Your body is doing what it thinks it needs to do, redirecting the fluid. But because the path is blocked, it's creating this buildup." I sat back, exhaling deeply. For the first time in years, the confusion had a shape, a name. "It's called a lymphangioma," she said gently. "Benign. Not cancer, but persistent. Benign." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. It wasn't a death sentence, it was a challenge. I nodded slowly, the words settling into my chest like warmth. "Okay," I said. "So, what now?" "We'll need a specialist," she replied. "Someone who can go in and correct the blockage surgically. It's delicate, deep in the neck area, but it's fixable, really fixable. And now that we know what we're dealing with, we can finally move forward." Something inside me cracked open. Not like before, not from grief or exhaustion, but from relief. She wasn't guessing, she knew, and for the first time someone didn't shrug at my story. They stood in it with me. I blinked a few times, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thank you," I said. Dr. Lee smiled, placing the scans down gently. "You've been carrying this a long time, Delano. It's time someone else helped carry it too." The rest of the visit was a blur. Referrals, paperwork, instructions. But none of it overwhelmed me because I wasn't walking out alone. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed in my little room and pulled Ariana's note from my backpack. I unfolded the paper, the glitter now slightly smudged from travel, and reread her cartoon drawing. There I was, Delano with the big lump and the tiny girl beside me holding a pink umbrella. But now, I wasn't just walking under her umbrella. I had a light of my own. The following week passed like a slow turn towards something brighter. Dr. Lee checked in every other day, sometimes by phone, sometimes in person if I was at the clinic. Never rushed, always clear. She made sure I understood every piece of information, every referral, every appointment lined up for the next phase. I didn't realize how much I'd forgotten what dignity felt like until she gave it back to me, one explanation at a time. One morning she handed me a list of surgeons she trusted. "These are the best people for this kind of procedure," she said. "I've already sent them your scans. They're reviewing everything." I looked at the paper, then back at her. "You really don't give up on people, do you?" She smiled, folding her arms. "I wouldn't be very good at my job if I did." And just like that, I started walking a little straighter. I noticed it one afternoon in the clinic bathroom. I caught my reflection in the mirror, shoulders not quite square yet, but more open, chin slightly lifted. There were still deep shadows under my eyes, and the lump hadn't gone anywhere physically, but something in me was standing taller. It surprised me. I reached up and touched the edge of the lump gently, almost with curiosity instead of shame. I looked myself in the eye and whispered, "Not much longer." Small words, but they echoed loud in that white-tiled room. One of the surgeons Dr. Lee recommended called later that week. He specialized in lymphatic surgeries, and though he was booked months out, he made space for me in the coming month thanks to her personal call. "I've seen the scans," he said over the phone. "It's delicate, but doable. And you've got a good team behind you. A good team." I couldn't remember the last time I'd been part of one. When I told Miss Armstrong the news over the phone, she let out a soft, "Praise God." Then she passed the phone to Ariana, who screamed loud enough to make my ear ring. "You're gonna get better," she shouted. "You're gonna be normal." I laughed for real then, not bitter, not exhausted, just joy, pure and sudden. That night, I walked a little farther than usual. Just around the block, but it felt different now. I wasn't pacing to distract my mind. I was stretching my legs, getting used to movement again. I passed a shop window and caught a glimpse of myself. This time I didn't flinch. I didn't duck my head or pull the hood tighter. I stopped, looked, studied. It was still me, still the hoodie, still the lump, still the same eyes. But the difference was subtle and undeniable. The man in the glass didn't look like a ghost anymore. He looked like someone returning. When I got back to my room, there was an email from Dr. Lee's office, a short message confirming my next appointment, but below the details was a single line from her: "You're doing great, Delano. We're going to see this through." I stared at that sentence for a long time. That word, more than anything else, carried me through the long nights that followed, through the waiting, through the fear that still lurked in the quiet, through the final days before surgery was even scheduled. It was no longer me against this thing. It was us. The call came on a Monday morning, just after I'd boiled water for tea. Miss Armstrong's voice was quieter than usual, controlled, but stretched thin, like she was trying to hold something back. "She's fine right now," she said first, before I even asked. "She's okay, but we're at the hospital." I stood, frozen, fingers curled around the mug. "Ariana?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She fainted during PE. They ran some tests. There's a mass near her lower abdomen. They think it's a cyst, possibly something more complicated. They're talking about surgery." The word hit harder than it should have. Surgery. Ariana. In the same sentence, I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. Is she scared? She's trying not to be. But she's 12. Of course she is. I offered to fly back that night. Miss Armstrong said, No, you've got your surgery coming up. We're okay. Just pray for her, baby." I promised I would. But after I hung up, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the stove like it could tell me what to do. Ariana, my tiny pink umbrella girl, the one who held her ground when the world ignored me, the one who sat beside me, giggling over pimple-popping videos, like none of this ever made me strange or broken. And now she needed the same kind of help I was about to get. Later that afternoon, Dr. Lee called with the final confirmation. My surgery date was secured. Next week, 1 slot, only 1. We're lucky, she said. The surgeon moved things around for you. And just like that, the air left the room, because I already knew. There was no second slot, no extra miracle, just 1 chance. And now, there were 2 of us. I didn't tell Dr. Lee right away. I mumbled something about needing time to prep, then got off the call and sat down on the floor, back pressed against the bed frame. What do you do when fate hands you something you've waited over a decade for, and someone you love needs it more? I didn't sleep that night. I wrote a letter instead. Dear Dr. Lee, I know this may come as a surprise, and I hope you can understand. There's a girl named Ariana. She's 12. She's the reason I came to see you in the first place. She found me on a bench when I had nothing left, when I was colder than I've ever been in my life. She brought me home. She and her grandmother gave me warmth, food, dignity. She has a mass, too. And she needs surgery. The same kind of hope I was given. I'm not canceling. I'm rescheduling. Give her my slot, please. I've lived with this for 11 years. I can live with it a little longer. Thank you. For treating me like I mattered. For letting me believe I was worth saving. Delano Crowfield. I left the letter with the clinic's receptionist the next morning before they opened. I didn't want to face Dr. Lee in person. I wasn't strong enough to see her try to talk me out of it. I knew she would. And maybe she'd be right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about lumps and surgeries. This was about what kind of man I wanted to be. That night, Miss Armstrong called again. I told her what I'd done. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You sure about this? She finally asked. No, I said. But it feels right. She didn't argue. Didn't praise me either. Just said, I'll let them know. Thank you. I didn't hear from Dr. Lee until the next day. Her voice was calm, but this time, it had an edge of something I'd never heard from her before, emotion. Delano, she said. I got your letter. You didn't have to do that. I know, I said quietly. Well, she continued, we're not going to make you wait. I made some calls, a few favors. We're getting you both in. I blinked. Wait. What? You're both getting surgery. It'll take some coordination and a little patience on your part. You'll go second, but we're going to make it happen. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She went on, you gave something up for someone else. That matters. So now it's our turn to give something back. I sat there, phone to my ear, stunned silent. All I could whisper was, thank you. Dr. Lee's voice softened. You're not alone, Delano. Not anymore. The hospital waiting room was colder than I expected. Not physically, though the air conditioning hummed just loud enough to be annoying, but emotionally. It was the kind of cold that came from fluorescent lights and the hush of worried people trying not to cry in public. I sat with my hands in my lap, fingers twitching without rhythm. Next to me, Miss Armstrong sat in quiet prayer, her hands gently folded, her lips moving without sound. Across from us, Ariana had already gone into surgery. She's strong, Miss Armstrong said softly, as if sensing my fear. That girl's got more spirit than most grown men I know. I nodded, but my stomach was tight. I'd faced plenty of unknowns in my life. Joblessness, the streets, the weight of my own body turning against me. But this was different. I felt helpless, like I'd handed the person I cared about most to fate, and all I could do was sit here and hope it was kind. Time passed strangely. Sometimes it moved in slow drops, sometimes in great jolts. The clock on the wall ticked forward without mercy. An hour, then another. Each footstep in the hall made my heart catch. Each door creak felt like it would be followed by a doctor with news. And then, finally, the surgeon appeared. She looked calm, tired, but satisfied. She did great, she said, offering a warm smile. The cyst was benign. We removed it cleanly. She's waking up now. Miss Armstrong exhaled in a soft, shaky sob. Thank you, Lord, she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, letting the relief wash over me like a sudden warm tide. My body slumped, shoulders loosening in a way they hadn't in years. Ariana was safe. That was all I needed. When I saw her later, groggy but smiling, her voice was small but steady. You waited for me, she mumbled. I squeezed her hand gently. Of course I did. Now it's your turn, she said. And it was. The next morning, I was prepped for surgery. The gown itched. The 4 stung. The antiseptic smell clung to everything. But through all of it, there was this strange sense of calm running underneath the nerves, a stillness I hadn't expected. Dr. Lee came to see me before they wheeled me in. "You ready?" she asked, clipboard in hand, eyes searching mine. "As I'll ever be," I said. She leaned in, her voice low. "You did something selfless, Delano. That matters. And now, today, it's your turn to let others take care of you." I nodded, too choked up to answer. The hallway to the OR felt longer than it probably was. Each ceiling tile passed above like a mile marker. The lights were too bright, the wheels squeaked. But I kept thinking about something Ariana had said once, while drawing in the living room. "You're not weird. You're just a story in the middle." Maybe that's what this was. Just the middle. Not the end. Not the thing that defined me. I closed my eyes as they placed the mask gently over my nose and mouth. The anesthesiologist's voice was soft, counting backward from 10. I barely made it past 7. And then, darkness. But not the kind I was used to. This one was quiet. Warm, weightless. This one wasn't loneliness. It was rest. I woke up to silence, not the empty kind, not the street silence I'd grown used to, broken only by distant sirens or coughing from the next alley. This silence was soft, still, like a room holding its breath. A nurse was adjusting something near my fourth. The lights were dim. My throat felt dry, and my shoulder didn't feel like mine. I blinked slowly as memory drifted back. Dr. Lee's voice, the long hallway, the mask. The moment before letting go. Now I was here, awake, alive, fixed. It took me a few hours to fully come around. My body felt heavy, like I was wearing someone else's weight. But the pain that had once been a constant hum, deep, nerve-aching soul-bruising, was gone. Not dulled. Gone. I turned my head gingerly, slowly, and looked toward my left shoulder. It was bandaged, of course, swollen, but flat. Tears rose to my eyes before I could stop them, not because I was in pain, but because the ghost that had followed me for over a decade had finally left my body. I wasn't marked anymore. I wasn't the man people turned away from at job interviews. I wasn't the guy hiding under a hoodie in July. I was just me. The next few days blurred into one long loop of rest, blood pressure checks, warm broth, and brief visits from Dr. Lee. Every time she walked in, I felt like I could breathe easier. She brought answers, and more than that, she brought presence, a calm that made the world feel manageable again. She showed me the post-op images, where the lymphatic blockage had been, what they removed, how my body would now redirect fluid normally. "The surgeon did beautiful work," she said with a smile. "You're going to be okay." I didn't know what to say to that. No one had said those words to me in years. "I'm going to be okay." It didn't sound like a wish anymore. It sounded like truth. When I was discharged, the nurse wheeled me out to the curb where a cab waited. She handed me a small envelope with a note from Dr. Lee. It read, "You carried pain for 11 years and still found the strength to carry others. That's not just healing, Delano. That's transformation. We'll miss you, but I know you're not disappearing anymore." I read it 3 times before folding it carefully and tucking it into my pocket. Back in Houston, Miss Armstrong was waiting on the porch when I arrived. Her arms wrapped around me before I could say a word. And this time, I didn't flinch. Behind her, Ariana stood beaming in her school uniform, holding up a sign she'd made, "Welcome home, New Delano." I laughed. I really laughed. The kind that shakes your chest and makes your knees weak. Inside the house, everything smelled the same: cinnamon, fried okra, and floor cleaner. But it felt different, not because the space had changed, because I had. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. No lump, no hoodie, no shrinking away, just me. And I wasn't afraid of what I saw. Not anymore. A month later, I stood in front of a mirror at a local community center, straightening my tie with shaking hands. It had been years since I wore one. The knot wasn't perfect, leaned a little to the left, but it didn't matter. The shirt fit. The jacket sat evenly on my shoulders, both of them. No bulge, no compensation. No fear of the fabric pulling tight on one side, revealing something I hadn't chosen to show. This was the interview. Miss Armstrong had called in a favor. Her godson worked for the school board. There was a position open, assistant coach and PE aide at a local middle school. Nothing fancy, nothing high profile, but steady, honest, something I could be proud of. When I walked into the school office, the receptionist smiled and offered me water. I sat for 20 minutes under fluorescent lights, but for once my knees didn't bounce. My palms weren't slick. When the principal stepped out to greet me, she extended her hand and said, "You're Delano, right? Coach Armstrong's recommendation?" I blinked. Coach Armstrong? And then I realized she was talking about me. The interview lasted 40 minutes. I talked about teamwork, discipline, the importance of showing up for kids who don't always believe in themselves yet. I didn't mention the lump. I didn't need to. I wasn't here as a patient. I was here as a man. 2 days later I got the call. You got the job. Just like that. I stared at my phone after the call ended. I wasn't even sure what to do with my hands. I'd spent so many years fighting to be seen, I didn't know how to stand still and simply be chosen. I started work the following Monday. The kids were loud, fast, brimming with energy and sass and questions. Coach D, you used to be in the Army? Why you walk like you've been through stuff? Do we have to run laps? I smiled through all of it. In my first week, I kept the story to myself. I wasn't ready to share everything yet, but I found myself drawn to the quiet kids, the ones who sat on the edge of the group, who flinched when a ball flew too close. I knew what they felt. I knew the way the world could make you small, and I'd learned the power of someone who simply doesn't look away. Then one Friday, I heard a familiar voice at the back of the gym. I told you he was real, Ariana said to a group of girls. She walked toward me, wearing a different uniform now, middle school, taller, her braids longer, but that same spark in her eyes. She looked up at me and grinned. You good, coach? I'm good, I said. You? She nodded. Real good. The kids filed in for assembly. I was asked to speak, just a few words. The mic was too tall, the speaker crackled. But my voice came out strong. I wasn't always a coach, I said, looking around at their young, open faces. I wasn't always confident or comfortable in my skin. Some of you might feel that way right now, like you don't fit, like something about you makes you different. A few heads nodded. Well, I continued, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Different isn't bad, it's just unfinished. Silence fell, the kind where you know they're listening. You're not broken, you're becoming. I looked at Ariana. She gave me a thumbs up from the back row. And no matter what you're carrying, on your shoulders, in your heart, there's someone out there who's ready to help you carry it. When the kids clapped, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Afterward, as they filed out, one boy stayed behind. He didn't say much, just walked up and bumped my fist. Thanks, coach, he mumbled, for, getting it. And then he ran to catch up with his friends. I stood there for a while watching him go, watching all of them go. Then I looked down at my shoulder, just for a second, not to check for pain, not to hide anything, but to remember, to honor it. That lump had taken 11 years of my life, but it had given me something too, perspective, purpose, and a story worth telling. And now, I stood tall not in spite of it, but because of it. And next morning I walked into the mirror one last time, same tie, same jacket, but this time, no shaking hands. I adjusted the knot, looked myself in the eye, and smiled. Delano Crowfield, I said out loud, letting the words settle. You made it. And this time, I believed it. Sometimes, the heaviest things we carry aren't visible to the eye, but for Delano, that weight was right there, on his shoulder and in his soul. What he thought was just a medical condition turned out to be a test of identity, purpose, and love. In the end, he didn't just remove a mass. He reclaimed himself. And maybe that's the message for all of us. Healing isn't just about the body. It's about being seen, being believed, and being brave enough to start again. Picture this, a man once hiding under a hoodie, now standing in front of a classroom, tie slightly crooked, heart wide open. He's no longer afraid of mirrors, and he's teaching the next generation that scars, seen or unseen, are part of what make us strong. If you were in Delano's shoes, would you have made the same choice? Have you ever carried something, visible or invisible, that changed how the world saw you? Tell us your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it. And if this story touched you, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life stories that stay with you, and don't forget to click the bell so you never miss a moment that matters. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care of your story. It's the only one like it.